What if I told you that some of the most powerful medicines ever discovered weren't found in laboratories or research facilities? They were locked behind temple walls, guarded by priests, hoarded by emperors, and kept secret from the common people for thousands of years. Plants so valuable that civilizations built laws around them, launched wars over them, and executed anyone caught stealing them. Plants that weren't just medicine, they were power, and the people who controlled them controlled everything. Most people don't know this, but while we're buying supplements off a shelf without a second thought, there are plants that entire empires rose and fell protecting. Plants that high priests administered only to kings. Plants that traders carried across continents under armed guard. Plants with actual clinical evidence confirming they deserved every bit of that reverence. And today, I'm going to show you 20 of them. Stick around because number 9 on this list was so sacred in ancient Egypt that commoners were forbidden from even looking at it. And modern oncology is now studying it as a potential cancer treatment. And number 20, the one I saved for last, was guarded so jealously by one empire that they burned their own fields rather than let an enemy capture the harvest. Hit that subscribe button because we post new videos every week connecting the sacred plant knowledge of ancient civilizations with what modern science is actually proving. Here are 20 sacred plants that ancient civilizations guarded with their lives, ranked from remarkable to absolutely legendary. Number 1. Saffron. Let's start with the most expensive spice on Earth, and it has been for at least 4,000 years. Crocus sativus requires over 150 flowers to produce a single gram of the dried stigmas we call saffron. In ancient Persia, Egypt, and Greece, saffron was worth more than gold by weight. Persian kings bathed in saffron-infused water. Egyptian physicians prescribed it for everything from digestive complaints to reproductive health. Alexander the Great used it to treat battle wounds. The trade routes that carried saffron across the ancient world were among the most heavily guarded in history. Adulteration was punishable by death in medieval Europe. Modern research has validated saffron in ways that justify every bit of that reverence. Multiple clinical trials confirm saffron extract is as effective as pharmaceutical antidepressants for mild to moderate depression. Studies show benefits for memory, anxiety, and eye health, specifically macular degeneration. The compounds crocin and safranol have confirmed antioxidant and neuroprotective effects. Ancient civilizations guarded it because it worked. Modern science is proving exactly how. Think of it as the plant that empires were built to protect. Still the most expensive spice in the world, still delivering medicine that clinical trials confirm. Number 2. Frankincense. Frankincense was the currency of the ancient world before currency existed. Boswellia trees grew in the southern Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, and the resin they produced, harvested by making careful cuts in the bark, powered economies for thousands of years. The Queen of Sheba's famous gifts to Solomon were primarily frankincense. Egypt imported it by the shipload for temple rituals and embalming. Rome burned it by the ton. The trade routes connecting frankincense sources to Mediterranean markets were among the most profitable and most dangerous in antiquity. Modern research on Boswellia extract has produced genuinely impressive results. Clinical trials confirm frankincense resin reduces inflammation in osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, and inflammatory bowel disease. The boswellic acids inhibit inflammatory enzymes at the molecular level in ways that pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories attempt to replicate. The priests who burned it in temples weren't just creating atmosphere, the anti-inflammatory compounds in the smoke had real respiratory effects on everyone breathing it. Think of it as the resin that literally fueled ancient civilization and is now being reconsidered by modern medicine as a serious anti-inflammatory treatment. Number 3. Lotus. The blue lotus of ancient Egypt, Nymphaea caerulea, was not merely a symbol. It appeared in every major Egyptian tomb, on temple walls, in ritual contexts across 3,000 years of civilization. Pharaohs were depicted holding it. The dead were buried with it. It was steeped in wine for religious ceremonies. Modern analysis has found that the blue lotus contains aporphine and nuciferine, compounds with documented psychoactive and anxiolytic effects that explain its central role in Egyptian ritual. Additional compounds have shown antispasmodic and sedative properties in studies. Egyptian priests controlled access to blue lotus preparations carefully. What the common population was permitted to know about its effects was strictly managed. The plant was considered a gateway between the mortal world and the divine, and the priests who administered it were the gatekeepers of that passage. Modern research is only beginning to understand the pharmacology that ancient Egyptians had mapped through thousands of years of careful observation. Think of it as the sacred flower that Egyptian civilization was built around, its chemistry finally being unlocked by the science that the pharaohs never needed. Number 4. Soma. No plant in human history has generated more scholarly debate than Soma, the sacred drink of the ancient Vedic civilization of India, described in the Rig Veda in over 100 hymns as the drink of the gods, the source of immortality, the medicine that made warriors invincible and priests divine. The exact identity of Soma has been argued for centuries. The most compelling evidence points to ephedra, specifically Ephedra sinica, which grows across the regions where the Vedic civilization developed. Ephedra contains ephedrine, a powerful stimulant that increases heart rate, dilates airways, sharpens mental alertness, and reduces fatigue dramatically. It was the original performance-enhancing medicine, and the Vedic priests who controlled its preparation and distribution held one of the most powerful positions in ancient Indian society. Modern pharmaceutical ephedrine is derived from the same plant. The compound is so potent that it is now controlled in most countries. What ancient priests administered as a divine sacrament, modern regulators restrict as a controlled substance. The power was always real, only the context changed. Think of it as the most sacred drink in human history, and the most pharmacologically justified. Number 5. Opium poppy. Papaver somniferum has been cultivated since at least 3400 BCE in Lower Mesopotamia, where the Sumerians called it the joy plant. From there, it moved to Egypt, where it became a temple medicine administered by priests for pain and ritual purposes. In ancient Greece, the god Morpheus, god of sleep, was depicted carrying poppy flowers. The oracle at Delphi may have used opium in her preparations. By the time of the Roman Empire, opium was a controlled substance managed by the state, traded at enormous profit along routes that prefigure the modern drug trade by 2,000 years. The pharmacology needs no modern validation. We already know how powerfully the compounds in Papaver somniferum act on the human nervous system. What's worth understanding is the ancient sophistication around it. These civilizations didn't stumble onto opium accidentally. They understood its dose-dependent effects, its risks, its therapeutic window. They guarded it not just for profit, but because they understood that access to this plant was access to relief from pain in a world with no other option. The priests and physicians who controlled it held the power of mercy. Think of it as the plant that defined the boundary between healing and harm for 5,000 years, and still does. Number 6. Cannabis. Long before recreational use and modern controversy, cannabis was one of the most widely used and carefully controlled sacred medicines in the ancient world. The Scythians burned it in ritual sweat lodges described by Herodotus. Ancient Chinese texts from 2700 BCE prescribe it for over 100 ailments. The Zoroastrian sacred text describes it as the foremost of 10,000 medicinal plants. Indian Ayurvedic tradition placed it in its highest category of medicines. Egyptian medical papyri document its use for inflammation. In virtually every ancient civilization that had access to cannabis sativa, there were both sacred uses and controlled medical applications managed by a privileged class of healers or priests. Modern research has confirmed anti-inflammatory, analgesic, anti-anxiety, and anti-seizure effects from cannabis compounds. The ancient world's reverence was not mystical projection. It was accurate pharmacological assessment based on thousands of years of observation. Think of it as the most widely revered medicinal plant in ancient history. Its reputation built across dozens of independent civilizations who each arrived at the same conclusion. Number 7. Mandrake. The mandrake root, Mandragora officinarum, has generated more mythology, more fear, and more fascination than almost any other plant in history. The root grows in a shape that resembles the human body: arms, legs, a torso, and ancient peoples across the Mediterranean and Middle East believed this meant the plant carried a human spirit. It appears in the Bible, in Homer, in Shakespeare. Pulling it from the ground was said to kill anyone who heard it scream. That mythology existed because the plant is genuinely powerful and genuinely dangerous. Mandrake contains tropane alkaloids, hyoscyamine, scopolamine, and atropine that act powerfully on the nervous system. Ancient physicians used it as an anesthetic for surgery, a sedative, and a treatment for pain. Roman soldiers were given mandrake wine before amputation. The dose window between medicine and poison is extremely narrow, which is exactly why access was controlled by those with the knowledge to use it safely. Modern pharmacology uses derived compounds from the same alkaloid family in anesthesia to this day. The ancients were not imagining the power of this plant. They were managing something genuinely formidable. Think of it as the original surgical anesthetic, guarded behind mythology because the mythology kept untrained hands away from something that could kill. Number 8. Silphium. Silphium is the only plant on this list that is almost certainly extinct, and its extinction may be the greatest botanical tragedy in human history. This plant, which grew only on the coast of Cyrene in modern-day Libya, was so valuable to the ancient world that it appeared on Cyrenean coins and was kept in the Roman treasury alongside gold and silver. Ancient physicians prescribed it for coughs, fever, sore throat, indigestion, and as a contraceptive. The heart shape we still use as a symbol of love may derive from the shape of the silphium seed pod. It was harvested so intensively that it was gone by the 1st century CE. Pliny the Elder recorded that the last known stalk was given to Emperor Nero as a curiosity. What silphium actually was pharmacologically, we can only estimate from ancient descriptions. The related plant Ferula asafoetida has some of the properties described and is used in medicine today. But silphium itself, the plant that an entire city-state's economy was built around, that Rome considered irreplaceable, vanished before anyone recorded exactly what it did. Think of it as the most valuable plant that ever existed, and the warning about what happens when greed overcomes stewardship. Now, if you're finding this as extraordinary as I do, the idea that the most powerful medicines in history were locked away behind sacred walls and guarded with human lives, hit that like button right now. It helps. This video reached people who are ready to look at ancient civilizations differently. And if you haven't subscribed to Ancient Flora yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're just getting to the ones that will genuinely change how you think about medicine and power. Number 9. Blue water lily. This is the one I promised at the beginning. Nymphea cerulea, different from the lotus but equally sacred in Egypt, was restricted to temple use and the funerary rites of nobility. Commoners were forbidden from cultivating or possessing it. Modern research has identified nuciferine and aporphine in the flowers with confirmed antispasmodic, anxiolytic, and mild psychoactive effects. But the more recent finding is the one that stunned researchers. Studies have found compounds in Nymphea species with demonstrated anti-tumor activity in laboratory testing, showing selective cytotoxicity against certain cancer cell lines. Oncologists are now investigating these compounds in earnest. The Egyptian priests who restricted access to this plant understood it was extraordinary medicine. They couldn't have known about tumor cells, but they built an entire theology around a plant that modern oncology is treating as a serious research subject. Think of it as the forbidden flower of the pharaohs, finally being studied by the scientists who may prove the priests were right to guard it so carefully. Number 10. Myrrh. Myrrh resin was so valuable in the ancient world that it arrived as one of 3 gifts worthy of a king at the birth of Christ, alongside gold and frankincense. The resin of Commiphora myrrha trees was traded along routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa to Egypt, Greece, Rome, and beyond. Egyptian priests used it in embalming, in sacred incense, and in medicinal preparations for wounds and infections. It was an ingredient in the holy anointing oil described in Exodus. Roman surgeons used it to clean wounds. Modern research confirms genuine antibacterial and antifungal activity. Studies show myrrh extract is effective against various bacteria, including some resistant strains. Research confirms anti-inflammatory effects and wound-healing properties. The priest-physicians of the ancient world who controlled myrrh access and charged accordingly were not trading in superstition. They were trading in one of the most effective antimicrobial medicines available before antibiotics existed. Think of it as the sacred wound medicine that was worth its weight in gold and earned every penny of it. Number 11. Coca. Long before cocaine, long before any European knew the Andes existed, the coca plant was the most sacred and most carefully controlled substance in the Inca Empire. Only the Inca nobility, priests, and soldiers on specific military campaigns were permitted to chew coca leaves. The penalty for unauthorized use was death. Erythroxylum coca contains cocaine alkaloids that suppress hunger, eliminate altitude sickness, dramatically increase endurance, and dull pain. Effects that made the difference between functional soldiers at 15,000 feet and incapacitated ones. Inca runners carrying messages across the empire at altitudes that incapacitate untrained lowlanders did so fueled partly by coca. The plant was also used in religious ceremony, offered to the sun god Inti, and chewed by priests during divination. The Spanish conquistadors initially tried to suppress coca as a pagan practice, then realized their own laborers couldn't function in the silver mines without it, and reversed the prohibition immediately. Power recognized power. Think of it as the sacred plant of the Andes, the one that built an empire at altitude and was protected so jealously because whoever controlled it controlled human endurance itself. Number 12. White willow. In ancient Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, the willow tree was sacred to the moon goddesses, to Hecate, to Artemis, to Isis. Priestesses of these cults maintained sacred groves of willow and prepared bark preparations that were distributed through temple systems to those deemed worthy of healing. The sacredness was not arbitrary. Salix alba bark contains salicin, the natural precursor to aspirin, the most effective pain and fever medicine available in the ancient world. Controlling willow bark preparations meant controlling access to the most reliable fever treatment available when fevers regularly killed. Ancient temple healers understood that certain fevers could be brought down with willow, and certain patients survived who would otherwise die. That knowledge, that power over death itself, was sacred. Modern clinical studies confirm willow bark reduces pain and fever comparable to aspirin without aspirin's gastric side effects. Think of it as the moon goddess medicine, sacred because it actually worked, and controlled because working medicine is always worth protecting. Number 13. Ephedra. Before soma entered Vedic ceremony, ephedra was medicine and sacred tool across Central Asia, China, and the Middle East. Chinese medicine texts from 5,000 years ago describe Ma Huang, Ephedra sinica, as a medicine for respiratory complaints, fevers, and fatigue. Persian Zoroastrian priests used it in the sacred drink haoma, the Iranian parallel to Vedic soma. The plant contains ephedrine, a powerful bronchodilator and stimulant that opens airways, increases heart rate, and dramatically reduces fatigue. For priests and warriors preparing for extreme physical or spiritual exertion, this was pharmacology that felt like divine intervention. Modern pharmaceutical ephedrine is derived from the same plant and is used in decongestants and emergency treatment for severe asthma. It is now tightly regulated. In ancient Persia, the priests who prepared haoma held the sacred and the pharmacological in the same hands, and understood, as modern regulators eventually confirmed, that this was not a plant for the uninitiated. Think of it as the sacred breath medicine, the plant that made priests and warriors feel capable of the impossible, because pharmacologically, it was making them more capable. Number 14. Aloe vera. In ancient Egypt, aloe vera was called the plant of immortality, and access to quality preparations was restricted to the royal household and the temple physicians who served them. Cleopatra used it as part of her daily beauty ritual. Egyptian queens were buried with aloe preparations. The plant appears in medical papyri going back 3,500 years for wound healing, burns, digestive complaints, and skin conditions. Modern clinical trials confirm that aloe gel accelerates wound healing, reduces burn damage, and has genuine anti-inflammatory effects. Over 75 active compounds have been identified, including polysaccharides that genuinely promote tissue repair. Ancient Egyptian physicians who controlled the best aloe preparations had access to one of the most effective topical medicines in the ancient world. The commoners who got inferior preparations or none at all healed more slowly and died more often. The plant of immortality was sacred because, for the wounds and conditions it treated, it demonstrably extended life. Think of it as the pharaoh's medicine, the plant of immortality, whose immortality claims turn out to have genuine clinical evidence behind them. Number 15. Turmeric. Curcuma longa has been sacred in Hindu tradition for over 4,000 years. Used in temple ceremonies, worn as a mark of divine blessing, applied to brides before marriage, and restricted in concentrated medicinal form to Ayurvedic physicians whose training lasted decades. The golden root was both the pigment of the sacred and the medicine of the initiated. Modern research on curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, has produced thousands of published studies showing anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and potential anti-cancer effects. Clinical trials confirm benefits for osteoarthritis pain, inflammatory bowel disease, and metabolic syndrome. The bioavailability challenge is real. Curcumin is poorly absorbed. Without piperine from black pepper, which Ayurvedic physicians combined with turmeric for thousands of years before modern pharmacology understood why. The ancient healers who guarded the knowledge of proper turmeric preparation were guarding something genuinely valuable. Without that knowledge, you have a spice. With it, you have medicine. Think of it as the golden medicine of the Hindu tradition, sacred not just in ceremony, but in the chemistry that the ceremony was protecting. Number 16. Ashwagandha. Withania somnifera was classified in Ayurvedic medicine at the highest tier, a rasayana, a plant for rejuvenation and longevity. And access to properly prepared ashwagandha was managed by Ayurvedic physicians who spent lifetimes mastering its use. Kings and warriors received it as a matter of state medicine. The root has adaptogenic properties that have been confirmed in multiple modern clinical trials, reducing cortisol levels, improving stress resilience, increasing strength and endurance in athletic populations, and supporting thyroid function. One study found ashwagandha supplementation significantly increased muscle mass and strength in resistance training. Another confirmed meaningful reductions in anxiety scores. The ancient physicians who classified it as the premier rejuvenating medicine in a system of thousands of plants were making a judgment that modern clinical research is consistently validating. Think of it as the sacred king's medicine, the Ayurvedic plant that built warriors, calmed anxiety, and extended vitality, still delivering the same results 3,000 years later. Number 17. Cedar of Lebanon. The great cedar forests of Lebanon were among the most jealously guarded natural resources in the ancient Middle East. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, is partly about the quest to enter the sacred cedar forest, which was guarded by a divine monster and forbidden to mortals. The wood of Cedrus libani was used to build Solomon's temple, Egyptian temples, and Phoenician ships. The aromatic oil has genuine antimicrobial properties, confirmed by modern research to be effective against bacteria and fungi. Ancient builders who used cedar in sacred spaces were creating environments that actively resisted microbial decay and infestation. The priests who administered cedar oil medicinally for skin conditions, wound care, and respiratory complaints were using one of the most effective antimicrobial plant oils available. The forest was sacred because the tree was valuable, and the tree was valuable because it genuinely worked in every application ancient peoples found for it. Think of it as the sacred wood that ancient civilizations were willing to go to war for, and whose antimicrobial secrets modern research has confirmed. Number 18. Black seed. Nigella sativa was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. It has been used in Islamic medicine since the Prophet Muhammad described it as a cure for everything except death. It appears in ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Ayurvedic medical texts. The seeds and the cold-pressed oil have been among the most carefully managed medicines in the ancient Middle East, distributed by physicians who understood its uses and respected across multiple civilizations as a plant of almost universal application. Modern research has produced remarkable results. Studies show thymoquinone, the active compound, has documented anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antioxidant, and potential anti-cancer effects. Clinical trials confirm benefits for asthma, blood pressure, blood sugar regulation, and immune function. Ancient physicians called it the seed of blessing. Multiple clinical trials suggest they were significantly underestimating it. Think of it as the tomb medicine of the pharaohs, found buried with a king, validated by modern science, still one of the most comprehensively studied plants in alternative medicine research. Number 19. Ginseng. Panax ginseng was so valuable in imperial China that the finest wild roots sold for more than their weight in gold and were reserved exclusively for the emperor and his court physicians. Wild ginseng hunting in the forests of Manchuria was regulated by the imperial government with the same seriousness as gold mining. Unauthorized harvest was a capital offense. The emperor's longevity and vitality, and therefore the stability of the empire, was understood to depend partly on access to the best ginseng. Modern research on ginseng ginsenosides has confirmed adaptogenic effects, improved cognitive function, enhanced immune response, and cardiovascular benefits across multiple clinical trials. Studies show ginseng reduces mental fatigue, improves working memory, and supports physical endurance. The imperial physicians who reserved the finest roots for their emperor were not engaging in superstition. They were recognizing that in a world of constant political violence and physical demand, the plant that genuinely improved cognitive function and physical resilience was worth protecting with the same ferocity as military secrets. Think of it as the emperor's medicine, the plant that Chinese civilization placed above almost every other earthly thing, and that clinical research consistently confirms is worth the reverence. Number 20. Cinchona bark. And here we are at number 20, the one I saved for last. Because no plant in history better illustrates the idea of guarding medicine with your life than the cinchona tree of the Andes. Cinchona officinalis contains quinine, the first effective treatment for malaria in human history. The Quechua people of Peru had used the bark for fevers for centuries before Europeans arrived. When Spanish Jesuit missionaries learned of it in the 1600s, the Spanish crown immediately classified it as a state secret. Exporting cinchona bark without royal permission was a crime punishable by death. The bark was called Jesuits' bark, and its supply was controlled so tightly that European powers launched espionage operations to steal seeds. The Dutch eventually smuggled plants to Java and broke the Spanish monopoly, an act of botanical espionage that shifted the balance of colonial power across the globe. Before cinchona, malaria killed more people than any weapon in history. Armies collapsed in malarial regions, colonies failed, empires stalled. Cinchona bark changed all of that, and whoever controlled cinchona controlled who could survive in the tropics. The Quechua people who first understood this bark's power had something that was, quite literally, worth dying for. And empires confirmed it by making the theft of its seeds a capital offense. Quinine from cinchona is still used in medicine today. Modern derivatives saved hundreds of millions of lives from malaria across the 20th century. Think of it as the most strategically important plant in human history, the bark that empires burned their own fields rather than surrender, the medicine that determined who could rule the world, and the reason an entire civilization's botanical knowledge was classified as a state secret. If you made it to the end, you've just seen something that most history books miss entirely. The most powerful people in every ancient civilization understood something we've largely forgotten, that control over certain plants was control over life and death itself, over pain and relief, over fever and survival, over endurance and collapse. The priests, emperors, and physicians who guarded these plants with their lives weren't being irrational. They were protecting the most valuable things their civilizations possessed. And modern science is validating, one clinical trial at a time, exactly why. Smash that like button if this changed how you think about ancient civilizations and the plants they considered sacred. Drop a comment and tell me which sacred plant surprised you most. Are you Team Saffron and the golden antidepressant? Team Cinchona and the empire-altering bark? Team the extinct silphium that we lost forever? I read every comment and I love hearing from you. And if you haven't subscribed to Ancient Flora yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We are here to connect the sacred plant knowledge of the ancient world with what modern science is actually proving. And there is so much more to show you.